It's really a pleasure for me to be here this morning. I am myself at heart an instructor, and so you can well imagine the gratitude and the pleasure that I feel at a ceremony where we were acknowledging the role of instructors. You know, as an academic, I think it is so important that we learn from history. So, as I engage in my role as chairman, still new, you are probably going to get tired of me going back in time in the context of these opening remarks. But I think it's so important because I believe that we all stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before. And if we don't acknowledge the role of history, the role of the leaders upon whose shoulders we stand, we are not likely to be as productive and as effective as we would want. As I say, you know, many of you here have been involved in research, and whenever you're developing a research paper, the first thing that you start by doing is your literature review, reviewing the work of others that helped you to get to the point where you are seeking to make your own contribution. So, the last time I was here to function, I started 5,000 years in the past. Today, today I'm only going to go back 60 years. 60 years this month. And 60 years ago, Norman Washington Manley took a bipartisan team to Britain to negotiate for Jamaica's independence. And in engaging in that process, he made a statement that is a favorite of mine. So if you hear me often enough, you'll hear this statement again and again. It was so powerful. But as he was speaking to the British officers who were involved in negotiating Jamaica's independence, Norman Manley said to them, "There is no country in the world not currently independent which is more deserving of independence than Jamaica." It was a very powerful statement, fighting words, if you will, where he was suggesting that Jamaica is the best of those who are not currently independent, and so Jamaica's independence should be met with acclamation and no dispute, no challenge. And that's exactly what happened. And Norman Manley could have said that because the Jamaica of 1962 was doing quite well among its peers. And we all know that since then, we have had challenges, but we have continued to try to forge a path that would make Jamaicans proud of their country. And this organization, which we are celebrating today, has been an important part of that journey. Although, as our MD indicated, this year we celebrate 40 years of the Heart NSTA Trust, our antecedents really go beyond and before those 40 years. There are three principal dimensions of the Heart organization, and they are complementary, and they came together in our recent merger. And the dimensions, of course, our commitment to lifelong learning, and the organization institutionally that began that process in Jamaica was an organization called the Jamaica Movement for the Advancement of Literacy that was formed in the early 1970s. Also in the 1970s, the government of the day established the National Youth Service. And service is now one of the key arms of the Heart NSTA Trust. And then for years, Jamaica had been trying to improve its level of training for trade activity, for vocational activity. And this was cemented in the establishment in 1982 of the Heart Trust. But again, it had its origins before that. I've had a personal interaction with all three dimensions of the Heart organization going back into the 1970s. And I recall in the mid-1970s, a number of us were volunteering to help in the building of the Junction Trade Training Center. That facility is now a part of the Heart infrastructural network across the country, but it predated the formation of Heart in 1982. So what Heart did in 1982 was bring into the fold a number of entities, and of course, in the form of the legislation that facilitated the ongoing training, vocational training of Jamaicans. So, where are we today on that journey? Well, we have continued as an organization for decades, trying to improve the quality of learning, trying to improve national service levels, and trying to improve vocational training. And the most recent pulling together of the Heart strategy came at our last board meeting, which was held just last week. And at that board meeting, we agreed on what we described as Heart's triple access strategy. And that triple access strategy has, as a core part of it, the three dimensions of which I just spoke, the three dimensions of Heart: learning, service, and vocational and technical training. But it also is seeking to meet the mission of which the MD spoke, a globally competitive human development infrastructure in this country, by focusing on three principal areas of activity. The first is to enhance the effectiveness and reach of our national training, learning, and service programs. And in this respect, we are responding to concerns that have been raised. But importantly, we are building on a phenomenal foundation. Now, once you start to talk about something that is positive, it doesn't get as much airtime in Jamaica, because we have really struggled with challenges of underperformance. And so there is an embracing of the negative and almost a disdaining of the positive. But we're not going to do that here today. So there was a recent, very useful report called the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission Report. And it appropriately benchmarked Jamaica's spending on vocational education against Jamaica's peers from around the world. A very reasonable and sensible thing to do. And in that context, Jamaica was spending more on vocational training than its peers. And then there have been some concerns, coming at least in part out of a report from the Auditor General that suggested that we weren't meeting our targets with respect to training. And so these two features have come together and they have created what we now see in the media. And I think in today's, one of today's papers, there was a discussion of the report from the Catholic Church, and they echoed the recommendation of that commission that there should be funding transfer from the vocational budget to early childhood education because outcomes in vocational education were unsatisfactory. So you say to yourself, okay, so we're spending more than our peers. Wouldn't it be really useful if we had a mechanism to benchmark the outcomes of vocational training in Jamaica against our peers? That would really be so useful because then you could juxtapose the spending with the outcomes. It would be so nice if there just happened to be such a benchmarking. It would be wonderful. But you don't often get the benchmarks that you want, and so it would be easy to conclude there is no such benchmarking. And so we know the spend, but we really don't have a comparative sense of the outcomes. Except that there is such a benchmark. The Global Competitiveness Report, for several years now, has been benchmarking the quality of vocational training from countries around the world. And in the 2019 report, which is the most recent report, there was a 2020 document, but it didn't get into the granularity of benchmarking because of the challenges associated with COVID-19. But there is a 2019 report. And the 2019 report had data from 141 countries. And it assessed the quality of vocational training across those 141 countries. Now, within the Global Competitiveness Report, Jamaica's overall ranking is 80 of the 141 countries. So we're the 80th most competitive country of the 141. A little bit worse than the middle, all right? Which is typically where Jamaica lies in many global rankings, just around the middle. But in the quality of vocational training, Jamaica's rank was not 80, not 70, not 60, not 50, not 40, but 36th in the world. 36th in the world. Now, let's put that ranking into context. Let's look at some of the other countries around us and what their ranking was in that 2019 report. So Barbados, which has a per capita income 3 times Jamaica's and has done very well on many dimensions, was 73. The Dominican Republic, which has been growing dramatically and now has a per capita income higher than Jamaica's, was 87. Mexico, which is a huge neighbor to Jamaica, had a ranking of 62. Panama, which again has a per capita income at least 3 times Jamaica's, was ranked 98. And Trinidad and Tobago, again a per capita income 3 times Jamaica's, was number 70. So based on the Global Competitiveness Report, and I miss eso, Jamaica is the regional leader with respect to the quality of vocational training. And so what we have seen here is a situation where Jamaica has placed resources into an activity and has gained the outcomes from that resource expenditure. It would really have been nice if this information had been captured in the debate and the dialogue that is taking place in Jamaica. But we have to try to assist that process. So, One of our goals in this triple access strategy is to enhance the effectiveness of that training. But the point I make to you today, particularly because many of you are the trainers, and you need to be a part of processing and disseminating this information. What I'm saying to you today is that we are starting not from a position of weakness, but a position of strength in our goal to get better. And that's important, because if you don't recognize your position, it makes it far more difficult for you to move forward. So we are starting from a position of strength, but we are seeking to get better. But Jamaica has problems that go beyond its vocational training considered in its narrowest perspective. So there are areas of activity where Jamaica is not in the middle of the world, but Jamaica is at the bottom of the world. And we're familiar with these. But again, that Global Competitiveness Report highlights one area with which we are all familiar. So, in the section on safety in the Global Competitiveness Report, there is a ranking of homicides per 100,000 population across the world. Of the 141 countries that provided data for that report, Jamaica ranked 140th out of 141 in terms of our homicides per capita. We are, unfortunately, the murder capital of the world. We're not surprised by this because we see this information confronting us in our media every day. But what is clear is that we need a national process to deal with that particular challenge. Because when Jamaica ends up being 80th in the world, even though in some areas it's performing well, relatively well, like vocational training, it's being pulled back by other areas. And crime and safety concerns in Jamaica are crippling every industry in ways that we don't even understand. So we celebrate our tourism successes in Jamaica. What we miss in that process is the millions of tourists that are turned away from Jamaica because of the report of criminal activity. And so when you look at our region, although we might, in our glory days, have had several million tourists visit either stopover or cruise, our tourism per capita is one of the lowest in the region, especially in the context of what is undeniably one of the most beautiful countries in the world, with a culture and a people that are the envy of the world. So what does that mean for heart? It means, as we captured in our triple access strategy, that we have to enhance the effectiveness, the reach, and the oversight of training, learning, and service programs directed towards individuals most at risk of being recruited into activities that reduce the welfare of all of us. That has to be our role. Right? We have to see ourselves as competing with other organizations, let's call them gangs, since that's what many of them are, who are seeking to recruit exactly the same demographic profile of individuals that are amenable to a vocational training program such as the one that we offer. So that's the second leg of our triple access strategy, focusing on the at-risk. And we have been doing that at Heart NSTA. We're committing that we're going to do it with even greater effectiveness, reach, and oversight. And then the third dimension of our triple access strategy is that we recognize that we need to both improve the supply, but also the demand for trainees. And we also need to be conscious of the ecosystem challenges that are a part of the framework within which our trainees come to us. And so if our trainees come to us with dramatically inadequate early preparation, educationally, family, etc., it is going to make it far more difficult for them to successfully pursue a program of training and gain the requisite certification. And so the third leg of our strategy is to both assist in the establishment of businesses that will create a demand for more trainees, and also where we can identify gaps in the ecosystem supporting our trainees, whether it is in early childhood education, as suggested by the Transformation Commission, or in primary or high school education, where we can see gaps and we can assist in filling those gaps. It is to our benefit to create a platform of trainees that are likely to gain the greatest effect from the training program. So the third leg of our strategy is to enhance the effectiveness, reach, and oversight of programs focused on increasing the demand for prospective trainees and supporting the entire ecosystem in a manner likely to lead to higher future enrollment and certification rates of our prospective trainees. So that's our triple access strategy. We were seeking to go on all three of those fronts in pursuit of our overall goal of enhancing human capital development in Jamaica. And in executing on this strategy, because strategies are worthless unless properly executed. And my own dictum is that when you look at the composite of strategy formulation and implementation or execution, the formulation is the 1%. The execution, the implementation is the 99%. And so how are we going to execute on this strategy? First of all, we want to fully leverage our multi-decade reservoir of institutional knowledge and national capacity in the areas of learning, training, and service. And I want to emphasize that because that's the triple dimension to our triple access strategy. We're recognizing that we're all three of those in Heart NSTA. We're experts on vocational training, we're experts on learning, lifelong learning, and we're experts on national service. All have to come into play. That entire reservoir, multi-decade, going back to the early 1970s. We have to engage in a structured benchmarking of best practice in technical and vocational training, in national service, and in lifelong learning. In other words, we need to know who is doing the best in the world. You know, if we go back to that global competitiveness report, our rank was 36. The highest ranking country in the world is Switzerland. We need to understand what is Switzerland doing. All right? Singapore was number 7 in the world. Costa Rica was number 17. So those countries that rank higher than us, we need to engage in a process of benchmarking, trying to understand how do we improve by understanding what they do. And we need to benchmark against ourselves. We need to look at what we have done in the past that has been effective and make sure that we stand on the shoulders of those trainees from Heart NSTA that have gone before. We need to further extend a very well-received program of stakeholder engagement. Right? We have started on that course. It's an absolutely critical course. I won't go into my remarks from a couple of weeks ago, but I was making the point there that, you know, we benefit from a tax. And when you tax people and you don't allow them to be represented in the taxation expenditure, then you have the American Revolution. So we need to make sure that our stakeholder groups are fully engaged in our processes because we are spending their money. Right? And it is so important for us to be sensitive to that fact, which we can talk about again and again. And then finally, we have to ensure that we are technologically ready to facilitate this greater training, learning, and service by enhancing our digital capacity. And we've recently engaged in a review process to make sure that we know exactly what we need to do, because the digital revolution is here. And if we are not digitally capable, we are likely very soon to be extinct. So that is the history of where we are and where we got here. But why am I so excited to be here? All the things that I've just talked about, the foundation is instructional excellence. It's the foundation to our organizational mission. As pointed out by RMD, our instructors are the largest professional group in our organization. But they are more than that. They are the heart of what we do. We have administrative processes and structures, but our administrative processes and structures are there to support you, our instructors, and where they are not supporting you, we are failing, right? We need to make sure that the entire organization understands its instructional role. And as a learning organization, not only ought we to be in the business of learning, but we need to be in the business of learning about how to be better teachers and learners. And so that's why this award ceremony, which is in its 27th year, I understand, MD, I believe it started in 1995, is so important to us. And we are so indebted to you, our instructors, who have excelled. And that's why I am so happy to be here. That's why we need to continue this process of engaging with our instructors, making sure that we understand your concerns so that we can fulfill our objective to be Jamaica's premier institution, and also to continue to lead the region in providing vocational training, vocational and technical training, national service where it is required. I didn't think I was going to, I'm not going to go into my personal experiences today, but suffice it to say, National Youth Service is a very important historical activity in Jamaica. So I want to thank you all for your work and to recognize that we're a part of a journey going forward. We have strength, we have to improve, but we are not, contrary to perspectives that are out there, we are not starting from a position of weakness. We are starting from a position of strength. Let us do even better in the years to come. I thank you.